Okay, so today we're going to look at some real number properties. This might seem like a lot, but a lot of these are things that you know already. You just might not have given this fancy name before. So the first property is actually the property that we looked at in our last lesson, which was the distributive property. And again, that's just multiplying each term inside the parentheses by what is on the outside of the parentheses. So some of the examples that we might have looked at in the previous lesson was something like -6 outside parentheses 2x minus 3. That -6 is being distributed to both of those pieces there. So that is that distributive property, that multiplication by each number on the inside of those parentheses. Second property we're going to look at is the commutative property. And the commutative property is something we use and you've talked about since your younger years. The commutative property, and this is easy to remember because it starts with CO, commutative CO, and the commutative property changes the order of the numbers, but not the answer. So there's two main operations that the commutative property works for, and that would be multiplication. And this we've talked about already. Remember the fact that x times y is equal to y times x. Those are the same things. Those are those like terms. If I get 3 times 4, that's the same thing as doing 4 times 3, right? That 12 is equal to that 12 there. So it works for multiplication, and it also works for addition. If I have x plus y, that's the same thing as y plus x. 3 plus 4 is the same thing as 4 plus 3. 7 is equal to 7 for both of those situations. So it works for addition and multiplication, but not for division and subtraction. 1 minus 2 isn't the same thing as 2 minus 1. One is a positive and one is a negative. Let's do the associative property also, and then we'll take a break. The associative property has to do with changing not the order like the commutative property, but this one has to do with changing the groupings, which is AKA those parentheses, but not the answer and not the order. The order does not change. The order of those numbers doesn't change because if it did, that would be the commutative property. So just like the commutative property, the associative also works for multiplication and division. Multiplication and addition. So when we're talking multiplication, if I take something like 5 times x and multiply that by 7, that would be, I would get the same answer as if I did 5 times x times 7, but had the x times 7 in parentheses first. So now notice here, the order of the numbers didn't change. The 5 came first, then the x, then the 7. All I did was pick up and move those parentheses. Instead of being around the 5x, they're now around the x and the 7. That is that associative property. And that also works for addition in the same exact kind of process. That if I have 3 plus x plus 2x, and the 3 plus x is in parentheses, that would still give me the same answer as if I did 3 plus x plus 2x. Again, notice the order hasn't changed at all, but this time the x and the 2x are in parentheses. So all you're doing is changing the placement of the parentheses. Changing the placement of those parentheses. All right, so there's our first three properties.